arrogant sister-in-law whose kids I was babysitting for last 2 years made fun of me at a family dinner because I refused to babysit her kids anymore because of my condition, so she called cops on me for a fake charge, and now her life is falling apart and she's blaming it all on me. For the past 2 years, I, Area, 33 female, have been the go-to babysitter for my sister-in-law, Guinevere, 37 female. Her kids, Mia and Noah, were adorable, and despite Guinevere's entitled attitude, I genuinely loved spending time with them. I remember when Mia was just a toddler and Noah was a newborn, and I'd spend hours with them while Guinevere did whatever she did. I'd play games with Mia, help her with her arts and crafts, and even read books to Noah. It was a lot of fun, even though I didn't have kids of my own. I found myself growing really attached to them, but things started to change. A few months ago, I was diagnosed with a chronic condition and it hit me harder than I expected. I had to drastically adjust my lifestyle. I used to be full of energy, always doing something, whether it was errands or helping out with family stuff, but now my body couldn't keep up with that pace. I was constantly tired, and even simple tasks felt like mountains I have to climb. The doctor gave me some harsh advice. I needed to cut back on physical and mental stress. At first, I tried to ignore it, hoping that I could push through it, but it quickly became clear that this wasn't something I could ignore. There were days when I couldn't even get out of bed without feeling completely drained, so I reluctantly made the decision to tell Guinevere that I wouldn't be able to babysit regularly anymore. I explained everything: how my health had taken a turn and how I needed to prioritize taking care of myself. I wasn't asking for sympathy, just understanding. But instead of getting the understanding I expected, Guinevere snapped. I still remember her exact words. "What do you even do all day?" It stung. I felt like I had been slapped, but I tried to stay calm. I mean, I wasn't just sitting around all day. I was dealing with constant pain and exhaustion that she couldn't possibly understand. And here she was making it seem like I was just being lazy. It hurt. She went on to say that it wasn't like watching her kids was hard work and I was being selfish for not helping out. I tried to explain again, but arguing with Guinevere is like talking to a brick wall. She didn't listen. No matter what I said, she was convinced that I was overreacting. I couldn't keep going back and forth with her, so I decided to just stop responding and hope that she'd let it go. But, of course, she didn't. Every few days, she'd message me asking me when I was going to start babysitting again or telling me how much she really needed help. It felt like I was being guilt-tripped into giving in. At first, I tried to stay strong and stick to my decision. I was genuinely concerned about my health and I knew I needed to listen to my body, but after a couple of weeks, I started to feel this sense of guilt creeping in. I kept thinking about Mia and Noah. They were so sweet and I felt like I was abandoning them. It made me question myself on whether I was being selfish. Maybe I was just being too dramatic about my condition. Maybe I could still help out a little, just not as much as before. But then I'd remember how my body felt when I overdid it, and that thought would push me back to the reality of the situation. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my health, my well-being, and being able to take care of myself long-term. I didn't want to end up in a worse condition just because I felt guilty. In the end, Guinevere didn't respond the way I had hoped. She didn't apologize or even acknowledge how my health was affecting me. Instead, she sulked for a few weeks. I didn't hear from her much, except for the occasional passive-aggressive comment. It was tough to deal with, but I knew that I had to keep my distance for my own sake. A month later, my husband and I were invited to a family dinner at my in-laws' house. Honestly, I had mixed feelings about going. I hadn't seen Guinevere since our last heated exchange, and the thought of her confronting me again made my stomach turn. But it was family and I didn't want to start any drama, so I agreed to go. I was hoping things would be civil and that maybe, just maybe, Guinevere would have had a chance to reflect on her behavior. Of course, that didn't happen. The moment we walked through the door, I could feel the tension in the air. Guinevere wasted no time making me the center of attention in the worst way possible. She greeted us with that smug smile of hers, the one that made me feel like she was already plotting something. As we sat down at the dinner table, everyone was chatting, catching up and generally enjoying themselves. It seemed like it was going to be a normal family dinner until Guinevere decided to speak up. "So, Harriet," she said loudly, "are you still too sick to help out with my kids, or is it just an excuse because you're too lazy to get off the couch?" The room went dead silent. I could feel my face burning up as I tried to stay calm. I'm not one to make a scene, but that comment, it was a punch to the gut, and I hadn't told my family members about my condition. My heart was racing and I could see everyone at the table shift uncomfortably in their seats. I took a deep breath and replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've already explained my condition to you, Guinevere. It's not an excuse. I'm just trying to take care of my health." She didn't even flinch. Instead, she smirked and said, "Health, maybe babysitting would do you some good, get you off your pity train." She laughed like she just made the joke of the century. and the rest of the table exchanged awkward glances. Then, the rest of the family members started asking me what had happened, and I had to tell them everything. I was furious, but I didn't want to escalate things, especially not in front of my in-laws. I just stared at my plate, clenching my fists under the table. I knew I had to keep my cool, but inside I was fuming. I wanted to say so many things about how she had no idea what I was going through, about how her lack of empathy was honestly mind-blowing, but I held my tongue. Fortunately, my husband wasn't having any of it and he jumped in defending me before I could even get a word out. "Guinevere, that's enough," he said, his voice firm but calm. "You can't talk to Arya like that. She's been through a lot and you need to respect her boundaries." But even with his support, it felt like the damage was done. Guinevere wasn't one to back down easily and it didn't take long for her to start throwing passive-aggressive remarks. "I just don't get it," she said, looking directly at me. "It's not like I'm asking you to do anything hard. Babysitting is just watching the kids for a few hours. I don't understand what the big deal is." Everyone else at the table just stared at their food, hoping the conversation would end, but it didn't. Guinevere continued to push. "Maybe if you actually helped out, you wouldn't be so tired all the time." At this point, I was done. I was about to snap, but I didn't want to create a scene, so I just took a deep breath, forced a smile and said, "Guinevere, I've already told you that I can't babysit regularly right now. If you don't understand that, then maybe we just need to leave it at that." She didn't say anything after that, but did look at me weirdly. I tried to push those thoughts away and focus on the fact that I had stood up for myself, but it was hard not to feel small in the face of Guinevere's blatant disregard for my feelings. The rest of the evening was just as uncomfortable as you'd expect. Guinevere kept her distance, but the tension in the air was thick and I felt like I couldn't relax. Guinevere's bitterness didn't end there. Oh no, it got so much worse. A few days after the family dinner, I was sitting at home trying to unwind after another exhausting day when there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened it, I was caught off guard to see a police officer standing on my doorstep. My heart dropped into my stomach as I tried to make sense of what was happening. I stood there in complete disbelief as the police officer explained that he was there to follow up on a theft report. Apparently, Guinevere had filed a claim accusing me of stealing money from her house. The words barely registered in my mind at first. A theft report against me? I couldn't make sense of it. I immediately called Guinevere to try and get some answers. My hands were shaking as I pressed the phone to my ear, my heart pounding in my chest. The phone rang for a few seconds before she picked up. "Guinevere?" I said. "What's going on? Why are the police at my door? Why would you accuse me of stealing from you?" She didn't waste any time throwing her insults at me. "You think you can just ditch my kids and get away with it?" She spat through the phone. "Maybe this will teach you not to mess with me. I'm not going to let you get away with anything." I was in shock. This woman had really just gone this far to make my life miserable. The accusation was absurd and I couldn't believe I was even having this conversation. But it wasn't about reason or logic with her, it was about revenge. It seemed like she was willing to do whatever it took to punish me for setting boundaries and standing up for myself. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel my anger boiling over. "Guinevere," I said through clenched teeth, "I didn't steal anything from you. This is insane. Why would you even make something like that up?" But she just laughed, almost like she enjoyed seeing me get upset. "I'm not talking to you about this anymore," she snapped, hanging up the phone. I stood there in complete disbelief, staring at my phone. How could someone be so petty and malicious? I didn't know how to process what had just happened. The police officer had been right there and Guinevere had taken it that far, accusing me of stealing. Stealing? It was so ludicrous, and yet here I was dragged into this nightmare. Thankfully, the police officer could tell that something wasn't adding up. After a brief conversation, he had already started to see through her story. I was an easy target for her, I guess. I had no motive, no opportunity, and certainly no history of anything like this. I had been at home the whole day, the money supposedly went missing, and I had a solid Alpine. The officer even checked our security camera, which verified my whereabouts. It didn't take long before the whole thing unraveled. The officer was polite and professional, apologizing for the inconvenience and assuring me that everything had been cleared up, but the damage was already done. Guinevere had tried to drag me through the mud and I had been forced to deal with the fallout of her petty behavior. Even though I wasn't in trouble, I still felt shaken by the whole ordeal. Guinevere's scheme backfired in the most spectacular way. Once Mark found out about the police report and what Guinevere had done, he was livid. I'd never seen him this angry before. He had always been the calm or patient one in their relationship. But this was the last straw. From what I gathered, he wasn't exactly thrilled with her behavior recently, but the theft accusation seemed to be the tipping point. It was like something inside him snapped. He marched up to her and demanded that she apologize to me. But of course, Guinevere refused. She was too proud, too stubborn, and frankly, too embarrassed to admit she'd messed up. I only found out about all of this after Mark came to my home to apologize on Guinevere's behalf. To be honest, I wasn't thrilled about the situation between them. It felt weird being caught in the middle of their drama, but at the same time, part of me was vindicated. She had tried to ruin my life with her lies and now the consequences were catching up to her. I couldn't help but feel a little bit of satisfaction knowing that things were unraveling for her. The worst part for Guinevere, though, was when the news about the police report reached the school where she worked. Guinevere had been a teacher for years and I guess she'd always thought her position was secure. But once the school found out about the fake theft accusation and the involvement of the police, things started to unravel for her in a big way. While there weren't any legal charges filed against her, the mere fact that she had involved the authorities in such a petty and vindictive way was enough to tarnish her reputation. I couldn't help but feel a little guilty for how much I was enjoying seeing her life unravel. I mean, I know it wasn't nice to enjoy someone's downfall, but after everything she had put me through, it almost felt deserved. It was like the universe was finally giving her a taste of her own medicine. For so long, she'd walked around with this sense of entitlement, acting like the world revolved around her, and now everything was falling apart. Of course, none of this came without its consequences for me. As much as I wanted to move on and put this whole mess behind me, it felt like every time I tried to take a step forward, I was pulled back into her drama. I started to feel bad for the people in our family who were stuck in the middle trying to figure out whose side to take. There were a few family members who felt sorry for her, who thought maybe I had exaggerated or misunderstood her intentions. But for the most part, people were on my side. Still, there were those awkward moments at family gatherings where I had to pretend like nothing was wrong, when in reality things had become extremely tense. Now that Queen of Mia's life has completely fallen apart, it seems like she's trying to pin all of it on me. In the midst of another one of our family arguments, she lost it, pointing her finger and screaming that I was the cause of everything that went wrong. She yelled that if I hadn't been so dramatic about babysitting, none of this would have happened. It was like everything that had gone wrong in her life was suddenly my fault. But I had already learned to keep my cool. I didn't engage in the shouting match. Instead, I calmly responded, "Guinevere, I didn't make you mock me at dinner. I didn't force you to file a false police report. You did this to yourself." It felt oddly empowering to say those words for once. I wasn't going to let her twist the narrative or make me feel like I was in the wrong. I won't lie, part of me did feel a small sense of justice as I watched her spiral. Seeing someone so toxic face the consequences of their actions felt right. Even if I didn't take any pleasure in her pain, I'd been on the receiving end of her cruelty long enough. I had to remind myself that this wasn't some petty victory for me. This was simply the fallout from her own decisions. The truth was, I never wanted to be in the middle of this drama in the first place. I simply asked for some space to focus on my health and my own well-being. But Guinevere had taken that request as a personal attack. And everything that followed, her accusations, her lies, her attempts to ruin my reputation, was all her doing. I wasn't the one who escalated things, but I sure wasn't going to be the one to back down. Guinevere no longer speaks to me, and honestly, I'm totally fine with that. If she can't respect my boundaries, then we don't have a relationship to salvage. I've learned that there are people who simply aren't meant to be in your life, no matter how close you once were. I've moved on from the drama and I'm finally at peace with it. The one thing I do regret, if you can even call it that, is the impact this whole thing has had on our kids. Mia and Noah were innocent in all of this, and I've always loved them like my own. I'm still hopeful that they'll grow up to be kinder and more understanding than their mother. I don't want them to inherit her bitterness and toxicity. However, this thing doesn't end here. Guinevere is now facing some serious issues for filing that false police report. I honestly didn't think she would be held accountable, but apparently, she's being investigated for making a false claim, and it looks like she might have to pay a fine or face some kind of penalty. Frankly, it couldn't have happened to a more deserving person. I don't know exactly what the legal consequences will be for her, but it seems like she's going to have to deal with it in one way or another. And of course, now that the walls are closing in on her, she's still not taking responsibility for her actions. In a move that I can only describe as completely out of touch, Guinevere started calling me. She's actually telling me that I should be the one to help pay her fine. Yep, you read that, right? She wants me to cover the cost of the mess she created, as if I owe her anything after everything she put me through. It's honestly laughable. And I am just sitting here shaking my head. At first, I didn't even know how to respond. It's not like I want to engage in this back and forth with her. Every time we interact, it just feels like I'm taking a step backward in my healing process. But this was different. This was her trying to manipulate me one more time, and I wasn't having it. I've spent the past few months working on myself and getting my peace back, and this phone call just felt like a slap in the face. She has no right to ask me for anything after the way she treated me. But then, she brought her kids into it and tried to make me feel guilty, and now I don't know what to do. Do any of you have any suggestions? Update 1. Hi, Guys, so I know some of you have had questions about my condition. I just want to say up front that I don't feel comfortable sharing too many details about it here. I hope you can understand, but I will say that it makes me feel really easily physically exhausted. It's something I'm still adjusting to. It's been a bit of a challenge. I'm learning to pace myself, but it's not always easy to explain, especially when it comes to other people's expectations. A few of you also asked how I ended up babysitting for Guinevere, so I thought I'd share a little bit about that. To give you some context, a few years ago, I lost my job. It was a pretty tough time for me, to be honest. I had been working in a pretty demanding role, and it was the kind of job that left me feeling burned out more often than not. After losing that job, I was kind of at a crossroads wondering what I was going to do next. I didn't want to rush into another full-time position. That would be just as stressful, so I decided to take some time to figure things out. Around that time, I found a part-time remote job that turned out to be a real blessing. It's flexible, it pays well enough, and I can work from home, so it allows me to have more control over my schedule. Honestly, it's been a great balance and I've been able to make it work even though it's only part-time. My husband also has a good job which helps, and together, we've been able to stay comfortable financially. So things have worked out, even though it wasn't the career path I expected to be on. Now, because I was working from home and had more free time on my hands, I started looking for ways to fill my days. That's when I ended up babysitting for Guinevere. You see, Guinevere and I have always been family, but let's just say our relationship has had its ups and downs. She's not the easiest person to get along with, but when I lost my job, I found myself with a lot of spare time and I thought maybe I could help out with her kids. It started when she had to go on a trip with her friends and her regular babysitter canceled last minute. She asked me if I could step in, and even though I wasn't sure if it was a good idea, I agreed. I thought it would be something temporary, but then, as time went on, it sort of became my second job. She kept asking me to babysit even when she wasn't going on trips. Her kids, Mia and Noah, are cute and I genuinely enjoy spending time with them, so it wasn't like I dreaded it. But that's where things started to get complicated. What started as a favor soon turned into something that felt like an obligation. Guinevere began relying on me more and more, and before I knew it, I was babysitting regularly. I didn't mind at first, but after a while, it started feeling like I was doing it more for her convenience than for any genuine desire to help. It wasn't long before I was juggling my part-time job with her kids, which was fine when I was feeling good. But when my condition started acting up, it was like I was stretched too thin. Looking back, I can't help but wonder if I should have set boundaries earlier. I think I wanted to be the nice, helpful family member who could do it all. But in the end, it just led to me being run ragged. The truth is, it's okay to say no. It's okay to take care of yourself and put your needs first, even when someone else is demanding your time and energy. Update 2. Hi guys. I know it's been a while, but I finally have some updates. First off, I want to thank everyone who reached out and offered support during that whole crazy situation with Guinevere. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I'm doing okay now. So here's where things stand. Guinevere did end up paying a fine for filing that false police report, which honestly, I didn't expect to happen so quickly. She was also warned that if anything like that ever happened again, it could lead to more serious consequences. To be fair, I'm glad she had to face some sort of repercussion for the mess she caused. It felt like justice, but at the same time, I'm not exactly celebrating it. I think Guinevere would rather pretend nothing happened and move on, but that's not really how this works, right? The more surprising update, though, has to do with Guinevere and Mark. So they're separated now. That's been a huge shock to the family, honestly. I never thought it would get to this point, but things clearly hit a breaking point for them. Mark was furious when he found out about everything Guinevere did, especially the false report. That was the final straw for him. And it didn't take long before they started living separately. They've been working on their relationship though. From what I hear, they're in counseling. And it seems like Mark wants to try and fix things. I don't know what will happen with them long term, but I guess there's still a chance they could work things out if both of them are willing to put in the effort. At this point, I've sort of distanced myself from their drama. It's hard to care when you've been dragged into a situation where you were falsely accused of something you didn't do. As for Guinevere, she still blames me for everything that happened. She refuses to talk to me, which at this point is honestly a relief. I don't think I could handle any more of her toxicity. There's only so much a person can take before you have to protect your own peace. And right now, I'm doing what I can to focus on my health and happiness. But despite how toxic everything got, I do feel bad for her. I know her behavior was a result of her own issues, but it still doesn't excuse what she did to me. I've learned the hard way that just because someone is family doesn't mean that they have your best interests at heart. Some people will manipulate and take advantage of you no matter how much you try to help them. And at some point, you have to draw a line. The one thing that's been a bit more difficult to handle is not being able to see Mia and Noah anymore. I miss those kids. They were a huge part of my life for a while, and even though things were complicated with Guinevere, I genuinely enjoyed spending time with them. They're both smart, sweet kids. It's weird not being a part of their lives anymore. I know they probably miss me too, but I don't know if I'll get the chance to see them again. Guinevere has made it clear that she doesn't want anything to do with me, and I don't want to overstep my boundaries. Update 3. Hi, everyone. I know it's been about a month since my last update, but I finally have some new updates for you guys. A lot has happened, and I feel like I've been on a bit of a roller coaster lately. Thanks again to everyone who has reached out to me. Your kind words and support mean the world to me. So let's start with Guinevere and Mark. Believe it or not, they're back together now. Yeah, I was kind of surprised too, given everything that happened. After all the drama and the accusations and everything else, I thought that would be the end of their relationship, but somehow they worked things out. It's also bittersweet for me because, as much as I'm happy that they're finding a way forward, I still haven't been able to see Mia and Noah. Honestly, I miss those kids. I spent so much time with them and they became a huge part of my life, but with everything that went down, I can't seem to find a way back into their lives. I know Guinevere has made it clear that she doesn't want me involved anymore, and I don't want to cross any boundaries, but I can't help feeling like I'm missing out. I still think about them all the time, and I hope they're doing well. On a more personal note, my condition took a bit of a turn for the worse in the past couple of weeks. I don't want to go into too much detail, but let's just say I've been struggling a lot more physically. I was doing okay for a while, but then I had some flare-ups that really knocked me down. It's been a tough few weeks, and honestly, there were moments when I felt like I didn't know how much longer I could keep going. I was exhausted, and there were days when just getting out of bed felt like an impossible task.